Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to KETIV's Autodesk Virtual Academy. I'm Nigel Ambayec, your host and I guess presenter for the day. So I'm a little lonely here in this office, but it's okay. We've got all of the viewers here and my team here on the back end helping me out as well. So welcome to AVA, our once a week learning webinars for the Autodesk software you and your team use in the manufacturing and engineering space every day. Definitely welcome to those who have come here for the first time, and welcome back for those of you who are returning members. So it's great to see you all back here today. So it's been a while since I've presented, but anyways, if you look at your screens right now, you'll be able to read today's topic. It's going to be AnyCAD in Autodesk Inventor. So AnyCAD was a feature in Inventor that was released a couple of years ago, and it helps people in regards to the interoperability for their workflow. Autodesk uses that word to in layman's terms, it's essentially how to take non-native CAD files and bring them into Inventor while maintaining file links. So what we'll do is we'll go over what that means and what that means to your team and how that'll help your workflow when you're working with outside vendors, when you're working with other companies, or even if your company is a multi-CAD environment. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. But before that, if you do have any questions, go ahead and type them in at any time in the GoToWebinar chat panel there on your screen, and we'll be able to answer those, or I guess I will be able to answer those when we get to that point in the webcast, which is probably around the end here. Expect to be here around 30 minutes today. It's gonna be shorter than usual. Demo's not too crazy, but let's go ahead and get started. So as you can see here, I'm just gonna show you for a second that with the AnyCAD functionality, we've got this picture here on the top right, and it shows you all of the different CAD files that AnyCAD will bring in for you. Inventor has a translator for these files, and it's had a translator for many of these files for a couple of years. But the big change that AnyCAD brought was it creates a link between the original file and the Inventor file, and I'll show you what that looks like here shortly. So our goal for today, be able to answer the question, what is AnyCAD? So like I mentioned, it maintains those file links between foreign CAD data and what you're bringing into your Inventor, either assemblies or just parts in general. Two, what was added in 2018 release of Inventor? So Autodesk calls this AnyCAD for Inventor, which is a little weird if you think about it, because the AnyCAD functionality now exists with Inventor. And to go a little bit deeper into that, what it allows you to do in the 2018 release is to be able to save that as a 2018 model and bring it into 2017.4. And if that doesn't make you excited, I'll explain it a little bit easier. Essentially what that does is it gives you a little bit of backwards compatibility with Inventor. So you can, before, if you were on a newer version of Inventor than your colleagues or say your vendors and stuff, you wouldn't be able to open those newer files in those older versions of the program. Now with the 2018 release and how it writes the files, you can open those in 2017.4. So if you have some people in your office who need to finish projects on 2017 while you moved forward, it's not a limitation anymore. You don't have to wait for everyone to jump to the newest release to be able to work with them. And lastly, how can I work with non-native CAD data? Generally, everyone works with non-native CAD data, whether it's from vendors, you're grabbing parts off of McMaster-Carr, you're grabbing step files, things like that. We're all working with those non-native CAD data. Sometimes we need to maintain links to that because those files are getting constantly updated. Whereas in some cases, you can just import it as a step file, things like McMaster-Carr parts. You don't really need to maintain a link to that original file name because more often than not, your screw is not going to change dimensions, or I guess the McMaster screw is not going to change dimensions on you. So let's move on to the live demo. So the easiest way to explain this is to show you how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and open Inventor. You can see here I'm in Inventor Professional 2018, and we'll go ahead and start this workflow. So I do have a couple of Solidworks files here that I got from one of my colleagues. They're working on some projects, and I need to collaborate with them. Maybe I need to open their files and such. So I click the open dialog box here, and automatically I'm getting this open dialog here. I'm looking in this folder and I don't see anything. Why is this the case? Obviously, I'm looking for Solidworks files or non-native CAD data. Down here is going to give you your options. I'm going to go ahead and just select all files. And that'll give me the Solidworks files. If you're familiar with Solidworks, pretty much all the file extensions start with an S, sometimes SLD. So I'm going to go ahead and open one of these. So I'm going to open this gearbox that my colleagues Alex and Brian worked on. in SolidWorks for their senior design project. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. For those of you who have used Inventor before to import some of this non-native CAD data, this is all the same. Go ahead and select your part or your assembly, go ahead and hit open, and then you get this dialog box that you see here on the screen. You get a couple of import type selections. So you have here reference model, which has that chain here. And if you go ahead and click through here, you can have it select that, or you can do convert model. And what that does is this just converts the model simply. It doesn't maintain a link to the original data. Obviously, we want to keep a link to this original data, so I'm going to choose reference model. You have object filters to select what kinds of objects you're going to be bringing in from that CAD data. It understands that none of these exist, so it's going to ask me solids and surfaces. That's fine. Inventor length units. So this is the units that it's going to bring it in as. Say, for example, you drew this in inches in SolidWorks. It knows that, and it'll bring it in as inches, or you can convert that to whatever you really want from within here. This select box here, what this will do is if you load the model, it go ahead and looks through the entire model, gives you a preview of what it looks at, and there's a bunch of different pluses and subtractions for whether or not you're going to import that piece in. This is useful for things like assemblies, where maybe you're bringing in something with 50 parts and you don't necessarily want to bring them all in. Maybe you want to simplify your model, keep the fasteners out of it, and keep your model less heavy in your Inventor workflow environment. Maybe you just need it for fitment and you don't necessarily need to bring in all the data, or you just need to connect to these couple of holes here. You don't need to bring in everything. So you can generally just click this, turn off components to bring in, or turn on components to bring in that way. Lastly, before we hit OK, we only have one part here. We're obviously going to import that one part. You can go into property mapping, and what this allows you to do is it shows you, hey, this is my Inventor property, and these are just generally all of the Inventor properties. And these properties here are from SolidWorks, Catia, Step Files, ProE, etc. And what it's going to do is it's going to map these properties from that SolidWorks file to the properties in Inventor. Generally, all of the property names are the same. There are a couple that are different. Obviously, if you got some special ones that you want to bring in, you can set this up in a certain way. But generally, I'm just going to keep this as factory, as the factory defaults of Inventor have. So things like the description, the checked date, the checked by date, part number, company name, it's all going to be in there, if those exist. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Sometimes, depending on how large your assembly is, it could take a while to bring something like this in, but it's already in here. As you can see in my model browser over here, there is a link to the original part here, which is the original right gearbox solid part from SolidWorks, and then I've got my Inventor part right here. Another thing to notice is if you look up here at the top in the materials and appearances bar at the top of the screen, you'll be able to see that it did bring in things like materials and appearances. So we do have our SolidWorks material that brought into our environment, which is 6061, and it brought in the color for that material that SolidWorks uses as well. You could always look at that here in the eye properties. Check this out. It's going to be, we're going to go through these. We're going to see what it brought over. So summary, nothing here too crazy, nothing too crazy in here, just general project. But if we come into the custom eye properties, it's going to show you some really interesting information. Name, last author is B.M. Punsuk. That's Brian Munkel-Punsuk. He's one of our engineers here, and he designed this in SolidWorks. And this is the information that it brought over. It was last saved on March of this year. 6061 alloy from SolidWorks. Sending system, SolidWorks 2016. This is going to give you information of where it came from. And lastly, we've got weight. So it's going to be 4.8. I believe it's pound mass. Physical properties, same thing. It's going to use that SolidWorks material properties. It's going to bring all of that in. If you go ahead and update this, it's going to let you know, hey, that's 4.8 pounds mass. Cool. So what we're going to do now is I'll show you what happens. Essentially, you want to keep a file link to this. So you're going to jump in here with your model, and let's say we're going to go ahead and make some edits, right? Let's go ahead and just center this guy real quick. And let's say for my assembly here, I actually need my drain plug down here, but I need a fill plug up here, just based on what I need to attach this to. So let's go ahead and start a 2D sketch. I'm just gonna go ahead and select this XY plane, and I'm gonna simply draw a circle. Cool, so I'm gonna dimension this now. Let's say I want a 1/2 inch circle, and I'm gonna dimension this guy to here. That's gonna be 2. And let's dimension to here as well. And let's make this 2 as well. Perfect. So I use some of the existing geometry. It's going to grab these edges for me that I can see. So I can still manage to get to this. As you can notice, the original design intent from the Solidworks file does not come through. That's generally the same for things like steps and X files. Generally, everything you don't have original design intent. You can't edit the original sketches from Solidworks, things like that. Doesn't come through. But anyways, we're gonna go ahead and finish this. We're gonna extrude. And just best practice here, if you want to extrude cut this, you don't want to necessarily denote a distance, because if the geometry does change, your hole might not go through all the way, or it might go through other components. So we're gonna go ahead and do all. So we'll do that, and we'll do an extrude cut through there. And as you can see, that new hole is in there. I want to make some more changes to this so I can show you what carries over from direct edits if I want to update this file again with an updated version. So say, for example, I'm just going to make some very noticeable edits here. I'm just going to do some fillets on these edges here, and I'm going to make them huge just so we know that they're there. And then we'll do a, let's just do one here too for fun. All right, so this is Brian's original gearbox design. Say, for example, hey, like Brian, I actually don't need this, or I can't even reach this simply because the design I'm building around doesn't need this. I need to go back to him or Alex and have them edit this file. I also need to get rid of these for some reason. I go to Brian, it's like, hey, can you guys edit this file, send it back to me? Generally, what would happen is you would get that file back and have to do all of your direct edits all over again. With AnyCAD, you don't necessarily have to do all of the direct edits. Some of them you might have to if the geometry you're relating to doesn't exist anymore. But generally, most of your stuff stays. So what we'll do here is I'm going to go ahead and just start a drawing here real quick to show you something really interesting. I'm going to go ahead and select the base view, part 1. It's going to ask me to save this guy. You must save this part of assembly before placing a view. Do I want to save the document? Of course I want to save the document. Let's call this gearbox. Whoops, can't type this morning. AVA. Sure, let's go ahead and place this view. And then we'll go ahead and do a parts list. We'll go ahead and select this guy, hit OK. Let's just jump in here real quick. Parts list, item quantity, part number, description. This isn't the information I want. Let's go ahead and grab some stuff that's coming from SolidWorks so that we can get all of that information. So I'm going to do material, grab this, and I'm going to grab mass as well. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply. It's going to give me all of this, and then I can go ahead and edit my table as needed to pull all of this stuff. Cool, so as you can see, the material, SolidWorks material, 6061, and the mass is 4.78 pounds mass. All right, so what we're gonna do now is, hey, Alex sent me an updated part or an updated model for this. Let me go ahead and pull that up, and I'll show you how that workflow works. So let's say I open up my email here, and here's the updated gearbox with some geometry changes. Cool, so how do I get my model in Inventor to update with this? If I go ahead and just save this into the same folder as my original, which is on my desktop here, and just save this guy down, nothing happens. Why is that the case? The case is, well, let's look at that folder. This is the part I just saved, and this is the original part. Both of those names are different, so obviously it's not going to grab that and edit the file. So what I can do here is, instead of just saving this file, if it's got a different name, you're going to want to make sure that you do a save as. You're going to go ahead and click the original gearbox, and just keep note. Look here on the Inventor, in the Inventor screen. It's going to show you right here Just look here to the left. I'm going to go ahead and save this guy down. The original gearbox already exists. Do you want to replace it? Of course I want to replace it. This is an updated part. And we're going to go ahead and bring back to Inventor. Oh, I was on the wrong screen. And now we've got this update checkbox here. Inventor automatically understands that some change was made to that file in the within the Windows folder, and it's prompting me here for an update. And if you open the drawing up, it's going to say, hey, the following components in here need to be updated. The drawing reflects something old. Would you like to update the model? Of course, I would like to update the model. Hit OK there. And we can update this model from here. Or you can do it from within the actual part itself. You can just click the lightning bolt here at the top for a local update. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the update button. It brought in some geometry changes. Perfect. And if we look through here, we get some edits. We lost all of these fasteners here. We've filled in this hole, and we filleted the whole exterior of this gearbox cover. Well, guess what? This stayed. This original extrusion and this original sketch, they all stayed from my direct edits. If AnyCAD wasn't in work here, I would have to remake all of these edits again. And I'm sure that's definitely a headache a lot of you have seen in previously when someone sends you an updated version of their part from a foreign CAD system. You're like, but I worked 15 hours on that and I need to go ahead and do that again. Well, yes, that was the case before. And now our things like fillets, our design history that we've made in Inventor have stayed. And we can go ahead and edit this. So say, for example, we made an edit to one of the features here that they removed in the original Solidworks part before I brought it over. You would get an error when you open this file saying, hey, the geometry that so-and-so feature was associated to is gone. What do I do? And generally, it suppresses that feature. Say, for example, you made one of those holes larger or something along those lines. Things like that would come through. But what's really interesting here is if we remember, this was 6061. And when I updated this model, it brought in my SolidWorks material. It's not 6061 anymore. It's actually 2024, and it's 4.84, whereas if it was before 4.76 pounds mass. So when you update these models, you don't necessarily have to jump back in here and make sure all of your parts list information, all of these properties are correct. As if you have to sometimes in AutoCAD, where you go ahead and change the model, you have to update like 15 blocks among different assemblies everywhere where that's necessarily used. With the power of AnyCAD, you can bring in those properties, make sure they're maintained, and don't have to go look for them over and over again. All right, so just going to show you one more thing here. Let me make sure I can find the file. Actually, the files aren't on here, but what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and send everyone who joined this webcast a file for themselves. It's actually a file that me and my classmates designed for my senior design project. It's actually a chess robot, and it's got maybe 50, 60 components in it, and you can try it for yourselves. I'll go ahead and send you the model, bring that into your Inventor, and you can play around with some of the functionality as well. I'll also have an updated version of that file that I'll go ahead and send as well, so you can try this. Let's switch it. Let's see what it looks like differently. I'll make sure that gets to you here pretty shortly. It looks like I'm having some sound difficulties for some users. Looks like we're back, no issues, so that's good to hear. And that's pretty much generally how AnyCAD works. So like I mentioned, you bring in your model, you can go ahead and it's associated to the file within your Explorer. If you edit that file within your Explorer, it'll prompt you to update the model. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, but it is a super powerful tool in regards to bringing in all of that stuff. And other programs do have similar functionality, but Inventor was pretty much up there as one of the first. So in summary, pretty much everybody uses foreign CAD data. We're not trying to rid the world of things like SolidWorks and stuff. We just want to play nice and make sure that, in these multi-CAD environments, whether it's you working with a vendor or you working internally even, you're able to bring those files in and get the most out of that workflow. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into some Q&A real quick and go ahead and answer some of these questions that are coming through. So first, can Inventor import solid edge part files? So right now, pretty much the biggest limitation I think in AnyCAD is solid edge. And pretty much no one's able to bring in solid edge except for solid edge. In the last couple of years, they've added some support for step files, which was 2017 release, and Inventor 2018 to 2017.4 was the big one for 2018. So maybe keep on the lookout. Solid edge could be something in the future, something in dot update. That's possible to see pretty soon here. If that's something you definitely do need, let us know. We can, voice that need out to Autodesk directly and see if we can get that higher on that list of things to do for improvements in the next release. Let's see. Does it maintain assembly constraints? No, not necessarily. So things don't necessarily you cannot edit the constraints. Say for example, you made those, I guess, mates in SolidWorks. I'm using those terms just because that's what I used to work in. If you have mates in SolidWorks, those mates aren't going to come over. You can't edit those mates necessarily, but the geometry is going to come in as you saw it in the assembly over there. It's not just going to throw in all of your parts and just scatter them everywhere. At that point, if you have those constraints already, you just make the whole thing rigid and you should be good to go. Nothing's going to move. How soon do I receive 2018? So actually, Inventor 2018 has been around since the end of March. So you do already have access to that in your account portal. You can go ahead and sign in there, grab those files if you do have current maintenance or subscription, and go ahead and install those on your computer if need be. Let's see. How can I be sure that AnyCAD is working? Well, let's just jump back into Inventor. You can assure yourself that AnyCAD is working if you see the file links. This is what it's referring to right here. If you can look here, I just right-clicked the original gearbox. Hey, it's linked to this solid part file. Cool. And how do I know that link is working? If you right-click it here, it gives you some options. I can edit the import. Say, for example, I needed to, in my assembly, select something else. I forgot to bring this model in, or I forgot to bring this part in for my large assembly. You can certainly do that here. Or it gives you the option to suppress or break this link. Say, for example, you're making a bunch of direct edits and you just want to break that link. You don't need it linked anymore. Go ahead and break it here or suppress it if you need it back again, and you can work that way. So any updates that may happen to this maybe SolidWorks model, if they're on a network drive that you're accessing, aren't going to affect your Inventor model. If you're working in a multi-CAD internal environment, something like that. And let's see, can Inventor accept Revit files? So I really like to get into that deeper and see what kind of workflow you're using in regards to Inventor and Revit. Are you trying to open the Revit family directly into Inventor? Are you trying to export directly out of Inventor into Revit? There's a couple of workflows for that, and I can follow up with you afterwards in regards to what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish, and the best way to go about that. So definitely look out for an email from me later, David, and we can discuss what your needs are. Let's see. When will Service Pack 1 come out for 2018? I have no clue. I think there have been a couple of hot fixes for 2018, if I remember correctly. But Service Packs generally come out a couple of months later. They tend to be a little bit larger. We don't know when they're coming out. So when they do come out, expect an announcement here during AVA one of these weeks to let you know, hey, 2018.1 is out. Go ahead and download it. All right. So the question here is I can use AnyCAD to make changes to my coworkers' SolidWorks files. That's a negatory. So any of these direct edits you make are linked to that original SolidWorks file, but you're not making changes to the SolidWorks file. You're using it as a reference for your Inventor model. So no, you're not direct editing your neighbor's SolidWorks files. You're making a new Inventor part or an assembly that is related to that SolidWorks assembly or part file in some way. If you wanted to work SolidWorks to Inventor, then back to SolidWorks, then back to Inventor, back and forth over and over again, SolidWorks has added similar functionality this year. It came out in February. So if that's something that interests you, you can go ahead and search that. They do have a similar technology I'm not 100% sure how it works, but from what I've read, it's pretty much the same thing. How do these files store in Vault? Does it store the step file or the Solidworks file? So yes, that's something I was going to go over if that did come up. So with Vault, really interesting how AnyCAD uses these files. So what it's going to do is it's actually going to vault the original file. So if you've got your Inventor assembly that's associated to a SolidWorks assembly that goes deep down into 50 parts, it understands, hey, my Inventor assembly needs this SolidWorks assembly, and this SolidWorks assembly needs all of its parts. So when you load the Inventor assembly into the Vault, it's going to grab everything it needs. It's similar to grabbing a Inventor drawing and loading that into Vault. It's going to grab the Inventor part, the Inventor assembly, and load those in as well. Same thing goes for the SolidWorks files or these step files. It's going to grab that original file, dump it into the Vault so that you can grab it when you need it. All right, is this being recorded and will a link be sent? I missed the first half of the presentation. So yes, Rick, this is being recorded right now. So hi, Mom, if you're watching this later. I don't know why you would, but yeah, so it is being recorded. It'll be on our YouTube channel sometime probably this afternoon or tomorrow. That link for everyone who doesn't already have it is youtube.com/KETIV Technologies. If you haven't already been on our YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe. There's a lot of great content that's not our AVA content. We have a lot more stuff that's up there. And if you need any extensions to any of these webcasts, we do certainly have training classes for Inventor update training, which happened, I guess, yesterday. So those of you who went to that definitely want to hear how that went for you. And all right, so it's an extension to the Vault question. So if I have this part in Vault, my SolidWorks part in Vault, and I get an updated file, how does that work? So what you could do at that point is do a get out of the Vault for the Inventor part file or the Inventor assembly. That'll grab all of the SolidWorks files as well. Go ahead and replace that file, if you got it in an email, from your working folder to whatever you had in your email. If you swap those, it'll prompt you for an update in Inventor. And you can, like I did earlier, hit that lightning bolt, and it'll update the model based on what you need. So like I mentioned, generally things like this don't need to happen. You don't need to maintain file links for things like master assemblies, things like purchased parts, if you're not going to edit them or if they're not going to change very often. Things that have been the same forever. It's like, hey, this is the grade 8 bolt my company uses, and we're always going to use this bolt. It's a purchased part that's never going to change. You don't necessarily need to keep a link to that original part file. Just import it. And maybe create a content center part out of it. That might be a better workflow. If you have any questions about that, let me know. And lastly here, let's see. Okay, cool. So this person said that I'm trying to open my 2018 file in 2017. I can't do it. What's going on here? So like I mentioned at the beginning of the webcast, there is now AnyCAD for Inventor. You can open 2018 files in 2017.4. So with that, you need to have 2017.4 to do so. If you don't have 2017.4 and need to find out how to install that particular update to Inventor, let us know. We can help you get that so you can work with your colleagues who are working in that generation above you. If you can't necessarily move to 2018 yet based on previous projects, things you need to finish, I know that there was a very large obstacle for people. It's like, hey, we need to wait for these people to finish working on legacy data before we can move up in version to get the new functionality. Why wait when you can just jump forward and work with your colleague in that sense? So with that, I think that's all of the questions for today. If you do have any more, feel free, or any that even are unrelated to this topic, go ahead and email them to us or give us a call. I know a couple of people have been doing that pretty much lately, and that's great to hear. It's great to hear from you. If you guys have any suggestions for future topics, I urge you to fill out that survey. The way we generate content and the way we kind of choose how these sessions go is based on your suggestions. So if you do give us some information on what you want to see, we can certainly move that up the tier list and make that there for you. Lastly, before I let you go for the day, I'd like to mention that tomorrow we do have a Fusion Fridays webcast. And I do have a follow-up email going to you all, so I'll make sure to include that link in there. Tomorrow we're going to show you how to create assemblies in Fusion 360. It's a little bit different. Actually, it's a lot different than Inventor. So Alex is going to go over that. It's not necessarily your usual workflow when you're creating parts, dumping into assemblies. It's definitely not that way. It's a little bit different, but it's super powerful in its own right. And we'll show you how to do that. Also, Autodesk is starting a new series of webcasts called Inventor, I believe Inventor 101 training. It's going to be every Thursday at 11. And I'll make sure to get you guys that link as well. I'm sure you've probably seen some of it in Autodesk emails, maybe Autodesk social media. It's going to be a great program. If anyone needs any more work or any more training in Inventor, necessarily not necessarily some of these more advanced topics, but if you've got a user that's fresh in Inventor, needs to learn pretty much the basics and how to get started using the program, these webinars are perfect for you. So definitely keep on the lookout for a link about the Autodesk Inventor 101 training webinars. We'll make sure you get that. But like I mentioned, next week, definitely be ready for the Dwg Underlay in Inventor. Super powerful technology. I've seen it used a lot for things like sheet metal for people who went from 2D to 3D, or not necessarily 2D to 3D, but in AutoCAD to Inventor to use their sheet metal. It's huge in that workflow. So if that's something you do, make sure you come back next week and see how powerful that tool is. So with that, I'll go ahead and sign out, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks.